Welcome to the Numerical Tarot, a new tarot paradigm, an alternative to tradition, an axial system of archetypal crystallography, a trans-culturally anthropomorphized, life-biased binary influence calculator, a wisdom system, an archetype enhancer, with harmony of interpretation throughout. The content of all the videos in this series are excerpts, edits and brief summaries from the eBooks All Things Are Numbers and All Things Are Patterns, links below. For a more complete explanation of each idea, additional reading might be helpful. Hopefully the basic ideas come across enough to pique your interest in trying this alternative approach to tarot. For this video, and all the tarot videos in this series, I would have liked to include images from the Rider Waite Smith tarot deck, being that it is one of the most popular decks out there, from which many clones are made. But when examining the criteria for fair use, the condition of whether or not my use might impact future success or market value of the original might be held against me, as I am definitely promoting an alternative that I would like to see supplant previous decks as a new paradigm. In fact, I would like nothing more than to see artists making clones from the ideas and imagery of the Numerical Tarot deck and its underlying structure, completely surpassing the Rider Waite Smith deck in that way. So throughout these videos I have not used their imagery. That is unfortunate in this particular video, where I would like to make detailed comparisons between decks. But written descriptions will have to do, and hopefully not get me in trouble. I suggest looking up each Rider Waite Smith card online as it is brought up for comparison. Wikipedia has an easy-to-navigate presentation, link below. It would be better if the cards were laid out in the same way as my deck, but you're not likely to find that anywhere. This video is going to compare the Numerical Tarot deck to the Rider Waite Smith tarot deck. You may have noticed that the title of this video is called Wrong, because, most assuredly, many who are devoted to the Rider Waite Smith deck and all forms of more traditional tarot will look at the differences between these decks and instinctively declare my changes to be downright wrong. And from their perspective, that is completely correct. Of course, from my perspective, I could also declare, and essentially have declared, the imagery of decks like Rider Waite Smith to be wrong, or the result of a more logical game design being corrupted by the syncretism of occultism smushing together belief systems that were never meant to be associated with each other or a tarot deck in the first place, creating a result that is objectively wrong to any original intent. So, what about these decks? In the previous video, NT017 Wrong, I went through the major icons of the Rider Waite Smith deck, comparing them to the Numerical Tarot deck and its unique arrangement. It took a long time. Way too long, one might say. Hopefully you had enough interest in this alternative perspective to go through all of it. But there is more. We need to now go through the minor suits. If you have opened this video before going through the previous video, I would beg you to not do that. Please at least watch the introductory information that precedes the major icon analysis. In order to keep the length of this video down, I will not repeat all of that. Please go view it first before watching this video. It will ask you to familiarize yourself with the drawings of my deck and the way I lay out my deck, as described in all the videos previous to this one. Because the Numerical Tarot makes several changes to the layout of a traditional tarot deck, especially when compared to the way most people lay out the popular Rider Waite Smith tarot deck. As we examine the cards of the minor suits, we will see how they successfully combine the qualities of equidistance, as well as progress from 1 through 9. In the case of 1s and 9s, as they appear in the Rider Waite Smith deck, we see how the aces all use the same symbolic idea of a hand emerging from the heavens, bearing the symbol of the suit in question. While on the other end, the 9s represent the various types of endings these progressions lead to. To the Numerical Tarot, beginning each line the same way, and ending them differently, symbolically conveys the condition of life itself, being that in life there is only one way to be born, but a million ways to die, singular point to expansive sphere. Of course, in the Rider Waite Smith deck there isn't much activity within the aces with which to convey the various keywords of the deck at a glance chart used by the Numerical Tarot, or to even associate these cards to their parents in the majors the way the Numerical Tarot does. But the aces are unique in this way, and as we continue this analysis into other cards, this will be less of a problem. But as aces go, the Rider Waite Smith aces do contain some symbols that, to the Numerical Tarot, could hint to their unique position within the matrix of interrelated ideas being presented in this study. The Numerical Tarot has an association of seasons to suits that is a bit different than tradition. To the Numerical Tarot, the Ace of Pentacles shows us the Garden of the Magician card, symbolizing the forces of spring. The Ace of Cups, roses in the Isomorphic Tarot deck, shows us an abundance of water, a symbol of the subconscious yin forces at work in the suit of summer. Then, the earth tones in the landscape of the Ace of Wands symbolize the forces of autumn. And finally, the cold blue mountains, behind the Ace of Swords, symbolizes the forces of winter. Looking at the nines, we see two kinds of finite endings, as well as two kinds of infinite non-endings. In the Nine of Pentacles we have an ending involving a woman in a garden, surrounded by a wall of fruition, symbolized by the grapes, or fruit, all around her. This is the same garden as the one seen in the Ace, but with much more growth. This card marks the finite tangible end of the positive or ameliorative number lines. Moving to the Nine of Wands, we see a different kind of wall, symbolizing the finite ending of a negative deteriorative number line. Here we have a very determined-looking man standing guard against an unknown enemy. To the Numerical Tarot, the wall of wands behind him is seen as an impenetrable obstacle, or a finite dead end, abrupt, arresting and futile. For our two infinite non-endings, we turn to the suit of cups. In the Nine of Cups, we see a man sitting in front of a table, displaying a full and plentiful wealth of cups. He symbolizes eternal happiness and a bright future, the emotional counterpart to the Nine of Pentacles fruition. In the Nine of Swords we see the negative side of eternity. Here, the endless empty reaches of darkness, brings fear in the night. Nightmares and insanity plague the occupant of this card as a look into the great abyss disturbs her sleep. On the matrix, these are the basic concepts of these various cards, the ones and nines, but while all cards remain capable of describing both physical activities as well as emotional thought, we can gain additional insight by once again observing the 8 positions each number holds on the matrix of overlapping influence. With this approach, we see how the Ace of Pentacles accurately represents the physical action of starting an endeavor, while the equidistant 9 represents the end of a thought process, like the answer to a question. In continuing, we see how the Ace of Cups represents the concept of a state of being, in its purest form, while the Nine of Cups has already been described as the emotional equivalent to the Nine of Pentacles fruition, emotional satisfaction. On the negative side, the Ace of Wands represents the action of a false start or bad start, while the thought process of the Nine of Wands represents the stubborn mind, or oppressed mind, as false starts lead to dead ends. The Ace of Swords then represents the state of a determined mind on the brink of giving up, while the Nine of Swords reveals the dark emotions behind the oppression of the Nine of Wands, and the even darker emotions behind a literal physical death of tangible things, found in the Nine of Wands. The woman in the Nine of Swords is grieving for whatever physical death took place in the correlative Nine of Wands. Back to majors. In relating these cards back to the majors we can see how the Ace of Pentacles represents the magician's intellect and incipient will to begin, as well as his garden, while the Ace of Cups represents his hypnotic presence. On the other side we can see how the Ace of Wands represents a fatalistic mind with its false starts, while the Ace of Swords represents a cold and stolid presence. On the other side we can see how the multifarious infinity of the Nine of Cups and the fruitful conclusion of the Nine of Pentacles relate to the consummate knowledge of the hermit. While the vacuous infinity of the Nine of Swords and the abrupt and arresting conclusion of the Nine of Wands relate to the idea of literal death and darkness, as seen in the Moon card. In the seasonal tarot deck, we see the One of Coins as spring with oak leaves and acorns. The One of Cups as summer with elm trees. The One of Staves as autumn with maple trees. The One of Swords as winter with pine trees. The Nine of Coins shows an affirmative end with an elevated ball, and a child ready to repeat the geometric progression as the beginning point. Opposed in the Nine of Staves with a heavy sinking end that threatens to crush a child so that no more happens. The Nine of Cups we see a man in contemplation of the universe. Opposed by a woman scared of the dark and crying. In the Isomorphic Tarot deck, a good beginning is symbolized by a rising sun and a starting gun. On the opposite deteriorate side, a turtle, snail and inchworm symbolize a very slow beginning. In the suit of roses, the idea of intellectual brilliance is seen in the light bulb. On the other deteriorate side, the idea of intellectual stupidity is seen in the cold dead brain as well as the fool's cap. A fruitful ending is seen in a flag atop a mountain peak, in the Nine of Coins. On the deteriorate side, a dead end is seen in a tombstone and vulture, in the Nine of Staves. In the suit of roses, a happy perpetuity is seen in a fountain, rainbow and cornucopia. On the deteriorate side, an unhappy perpetuity is seen in bats coming out of hell, in the Nine of Swords. In the Numerical Tarot deck, many ideas are carried over from the isomorphic deck. On the positive side, a good beginning is seen with a young boy showing us a seed he is about to plant. An intelligent presence is seen in a young girl holding a glowing orb. They are opposed by a young boy about to squish an ant, and a young girl with zombie eyes and an empty jar. A good ending is seen with a man reaching the top of a mountain. A woman holds a diagram of order and organization. They are opposed by a rotting corpse who has reached his end, and a widow who is confused. The 2s and 8s contain the symbols of balance, motion, energy and space. The easiest to see, of all these, are the 2 examples of balance within the 2 of Cups and the 2 of Swords. In the 2 of Cups we have a simple expression of balance in a man and a woman mirroring each other, with eyes locked. By coming together this way they express the attraction found at this stage in the sexual progression. The balance between them is harmonious and productive. Their eyes are open, their lives are parallel. On the other hand, in the 2 of Swords we have a blindfolded woman with arms crossed. Her crossed arms, holding 2 swords, symbolizes tension between opposites, or balance that is not harmonious and productive, but rancorous and unproductive. Positioned equidistantly across the number line from the 2s are the 8s. Here we have 2 examples of energy. In the 8 of Pentacles we see a craftsman working diligently at his trade. To the Numerical Tarot, this card symbolizes the energy of enthusiasm toward an activity one enjoys. This is the card of optimism and adrenaline, of positive energy and excitement. On the negative side, in the 8 of Wands, we see how the same energy has now become sporadic and out of control. The Numerical Tarot views this as the card of the final burst of energy phenomenon described in the dying progression. In this card, we find a handful of wands being hurled all at once, across a field, in one final burst of energy, before landing at the feet of the 9 of Wands, the dead end card. The downward angle of the wands, when read left to right, symbolizes exhaustion, as energy is about to fail. Moving on to the intangible side of the 8s, we see 2 examples of space. In the 8 of Cups we see the positive aspects of space, wide open panoramic spaces, the kind of spaces dancers like to fill with light and airy movement and expression. But for reasons specific to the Rider Waite Smith deck they have chosen to express a darker, more somber side to what the Numerical Tarot thinks should be a positive condition, with a man who has turned his back on his wealth of cups to venture into the moonlit night. His spaces are still wide open, but the mood looks much sadder. Across from the positive 8 of Cups is the negative 8 of Swords. The 8 of Swords shows us the opposite of wide open spaces with a woman surrounded by swords, bound with cloth and blindfolded. Actually, as we can see, this woman has just as much space to move into as the 8 of Cups, but because of the inhibiting factors around her, she is unable, or unwilling. Her blindfolded condition puts her in the same fear of dark predicament as the following 9, only here that darkness is limiting her spatial expression. Also by repeating the symbol of a blindfold, this card reveals equidistant similarities between itself and the 2 of Swords mentioned earlier. In continuing, we can jump back to the 2 of Pentacles and the 2 of Wands to observe 2 different expressions of motion. First, a juggler, with a Mobius-like lemniscate, dances in front of undulating waves on the ocean. While it is possible that we could interpret undulating waves as indirect motion, and therefore misplaced as a symbol of an immediate and direct ameliorate too, I see undulating waves as a simple expression of motion itself, while the ships that navigate the waves symbolize the path of least distance type of motion associated with the 2 of Pentacles. On the negative side, the 2 of Wands has what appears to be a symbol of no motion, or arrested motion. Here we see another navigator of sorts, evidenced by the globe in his hand. Only this navigator is not out on the water doing his thing, instead he is patiently, or perhaps impatiently, waiting for his fleet to return. By not being out on the undulating waves, this card also symbolizes the frustration of inhibited motion or motion that is not allowed to move. We see this man as eager, and waiting. Actually, the emotion of frustration would be in the 2 of Swords. This kind of frustration, seen in the physical blockage of the 2 of Wands, and the emotional tension of the 2 of Swords, is what eventually leads to the uncontrolled burst of energy found in the equidistant Eight of Wands, as well as the feelings of inhibition and limited space in the Eight of Swords. On the matrix. So in this matrix formation, we see how the Two of Pentacles equals the action of motion, while the Eight of Pentacles represents the thought process of a mind that is exhilarated in its work. The Two of Cups represents the timeless state of being dual, while the equidistant Eight of Cups expresses the emotions of an explorer, entering into the space around him. On the negative side, the Two of Wands again relates to the physical limits of motion, while the Eight of Wands refers to the thought process of an exhausted mind. The Two of Swords shows us a state of tension, while the Eight of Swords represents the emotions behind restricted space and how the physical exhaustion in the Eight of Wands leaves you feeling burnt out and incapable of radiating any personal space at all. Back to majors. In relating these cards to the majors, we see how the enthusiastic energy of the Eight of Pentacles is expressed in the card of Strength. Perhaps the card of Strength should be renamed Energy. We also see how the exhausted energy of falling wands relates to the pouring of water from vessels in the Star card. The cards of duality, the Two of Cups and Two of Swords, reinforce the concepts of balance found in both the High Priestess as well as Justice. In the seasonal tarot deck, we see a man in the Two of Coins pointing to a destination and throwing, opposed by a man who can't see ahead and is just waiting. The Two of Cups shows a woman with alluring eyes attracting, opposed by a woman hiding her face. In the Eight of Coins, a dancing man spins a ball on his finger, opposed by a man expecting an explosion. Then, in the Eight of Cups, a dancing woman sends a ball into the air, opposed by a blindfolded woman and her dropped ball. In the isomorphic tarot deck, direct motion is seen in the path of an airplane taking off. On the negative side, an obstructed path symbolizes intermittent motion or blocked motion. In the suit of roses, we have balance and harmony in the scales of justice. On the negative side, we have crossed swords, not unlike those of the Rider Waite design, showing tension and disharmony. The explosive energy of an eight is seen in a radiating sphere. While on the negative side, failing energy is seen in the dropping of wands from a crucified hand. In the suit of roses, wide open spaces are symbolized by doves flying free. While on the negative side, confined space is symbolized with bondage and circling swords. In the numerical tarot deck, many ideas are carried over from the isomorphic deck. Motion is seen in a runner taking off, while the idea of vision is seen in a photographer framing a view. They are opposed by someone on a blocked path trying to move an obstacle, while the idea of no vision is seen in a blindfolded girl wandering aimlessly. At the other end, explosive energy is seen in a man flexing all his muscles in an explosive pose, while a woman floating away with birds expresses the euphoria of climax. They are opposed by a marathon runner who is exhausted and throwing up. His wind-up key has wound down, while a woman tied up by black birds and blindfolded expresses the idea of depression and limited space, as death encroaches. Probably the easiest to understand of all these cards would be the Three of Cups and Three of Swords. In the Rider Waite Smith Three of Cups, we see three beautiful women dancing about and raising their cups as a joyous celebration of life. To the numerical tarot, they symbolize the peace and tranquility of the natural bonding force of the intangible side of existence. They express happiness, love and comfort. In the Three of Swords, we see how the same concept of love and happiness is being traumatized by three hostile swords. Behind, storm clouds are raining tears of sorrow. There is no peace and tranquility here. The natural bonding force of the intangible side of existence is expressing its bad deteriorate aspects. To the numerical tarot, the Three of Cups equals a beatific bond, while the Three of Swords equals an afflicted bond. Across from the Three of Cups, the Seven of Cups deals with the fantasies and imagination of a mind connected to the light of life. The various cups standing before the occupant of this card represent dreams, imagination, sublime spiritual connections and peaceful fantasies, all products of an imaginative mind. However, in the Seven of Swords we see a different kind of creativity. In this card we see a man sneaking away with the swords of an enemy while they are left unaware in their tents. By plotting and scheming, instead of planning and dreaming, this card symbolizes an aberrant connection to evil, or the workings of a bad imagination, i.e., a bad idea. Next, in the Seven of Pentacles and Wands, we see a symbolic representation of the critical pause found in all numerical progressions at this stage. This pause was of course seen best in the sexual progression, the creativity progression, and in the formation of the cube in the geometric progression covered in previous videos. In these progressions, the number 7 marked, with a pause, the point between the building up of the mass and the eventual expression of manifestation back to its origins via the following 8 and 9. In the 7 of Pentacles, this pause is symbolized by a farmer and his crop of tomatoes. Well, they look like tomatoes to me, taking time out to appreciate his accomplishment. Tomatoes are also a perfect symbol for expressing the idea of a moment that is ripe. In the creativity progression, a pause of contemplation was seen as the key to a successful conclusion. In this way, the contemplative mind of this farmer equates with the mind of the equidistant artist, in the 3 of Pentacles, who periodically stands back from his work to feel its expression. Moving on, we see in the 7 of Wands how the pause of contemplation creates the bad, negative deteriorate qualities of paranoia and feelings of lost opportunity. This is symbolized by a man who is at odds with his surrounding environment, the wands below. We see how, in this man's mind, he who hesitates is lost. Together the 7 of Pentacles and 7 of Wands show us the difference between the short and simple pause of the artist, versus the long, complicated, ponderous and agonizing pause of the paranoid. Moving back to the 3s, we see how the 3 of Pentacles shows us an expression of surface or skin, in the symbol of an artist sculpting the archway of a church. The beauty and perfection of his craft becomes a tangible expression of the intangible ideas found in the correlative 3 of Cups, that of sensitivity. This is the card, and number, of Pygmalion and Galatea, or any artist striving for perfection in a world inherently imperfect. This could also be the card of Exodus chapter 35 verses 31 to 33. Finally, in the 3 of Wands, we have a symbolic representation that totally eludes my perception. Most people identify this as a businessman overseeing his fleet of ships in the distance. However, connections to the number 3 escape me. The best I can do is to assume that he is unskilled at the affairs of business, thereby opposing the talent and grace of the 3 of Pentacles artist across from him on our matrix. Frankly, the obvious similarity between the 3 of Wands and the 2 of Wands makes me suspicious. Both cards show a man looking out over a body of water. One suggests navigation with a globe, the other suggests navigation with ships in the distance. Is it possible that Ms. Pamela Coleman Smith was copying ideas from a deck that had a missing 3, and just repeated the previous card with slight alterations? On the matrix. Perhaps by comparison on the matrix of interrelated ideas used by the Numerical Tarot, the true nature of the 3 of Wands will become apparent. On the positive side of this matrix of ideas, the 3 of Pentacles equals the physical action of an artist at work, while the 7 of Pentacles equals the thoughts of a contemplative mind at work. The 3 of Cups then shows us the state of being joyful, while the 7 of Cups reveals the myriad of ideas that an imaginative mind will encounter as it becomes connected, in a sublime manner, to the panoramic perspective and multifarious infinity of the following 8 and 9. On the negative, deteriorate side, we can see how the 3 of Wands is now logically forced to represent the negative equivalent to the physical action of an artist, conjuring up the notion of an inept and clumsy person, while across the way the 7 of Wands displays the hasty thought process that leads to such ineptitude. The 3 of Swords then reveals the negative equivalent to the state of being joyful, that of sorrow, while the 7 of Swords reveals the destructive emotions of a paranoid mind. Back to majors. In relating these cards to the majors, we can see how the Empress becomes the Pygmalion ideal that any artist would want to express, thus relating it to the 3 of Pentacles and to the joy and love of the 3 of Cups. While on the negative side, the Hanged Man becomes the inept and clumsy person full of sorrow, or, as in older decks, a traitor, hung up to die by people who hate, relating it to the 3 of Wands and the sadness of the 3 of Swords. The brief pause of the farmer in the 7 of Pentacles represents the grace and poise of the Chariot card, with the 7 of Cups representing his spiritual visions. Leaving the anxiety and paranoia of the 7 of Wands and bad imagination of the 7 of Swords to relate these cards to the violence and tragedy of the Tower card. In the seasonal tarot deck, we see, in the 3 of Coins, a fancy-looking musician composing or conducting, opposed by a crude-looking man awkwardly stabbing. In the 3 of Cups we see a joyful, happy woman and dog, opposed by a very sad-looking woman. In the 7 of Coins a woman is peacefully polishing, opposed by a slob. In the 7 of Cups, a woman is worshipping, opposed by a paranoid man lashing out. In the isomorphic tarot deck, artistic perfection is seen in the hands of a craftsman sculpting perfect pentacles. While on the negative side, a grotesque groping hand points to his creation, 3 skulls on pikes. In the suit of roses, love and happiness are symbolized with a bouquet of flowers for a lover. While on the negative side, an ex-lover has mutilated their former's cat in an act of brutality and hatred not too dissimilar from that of the hanged man of the majors. Physical comfort is symbolized, in the 7 of Pentacles, with a bird gently placing pentacles onto satin pillows. While on the negative side, a horrible violent beating symbolizes thoughts of suffering. In the suit of roses, a sublime connection to God is seen in rays of sunlight streaming through the trees. While on the negative side, a scary monster symbolizes horrifying hallucinations and a connection to evil. In the numerical tarot deck, many ideas are carried over from the isomorphic deck. The idea of a gentle touch and sensitive artistry is seen in a man polishing his smooth sculpture, while a woman holding a bunch of roses expresses the idea of love and happiness. They are opposed by a butcher hacking up a cat with a crude sculpture on his table, while a woman with dead roses expresses the idea of hate and sadness. On the other side, we see a guru meditating on a floating magic carpet, with roses that have been tossed to him, while a woman uses her imagination to connect to spiritual forces. They are opposed by a hapless man praying for mercy in a pool of his own blood, with stones that have been thrown at him all around, while a woman screams in horror at scary hallucinations of an imagination connected to evil forces. To the numerical tarot, 4s and 6s represent the coagulated cluster of the finite model of existence developed and put forth elsewhere in this study. In the model of existence, the 4 and 6 represent the exchange that occurs as converging opposites trade sides, making each a part of each other. With the idea of numerical etymology, we can see how the idea of exchange can lead to the idea of commerce and money. In this deck we see at least 3 examples of money in either a 4 or 6 card. In the 4 of Pentacles we see a good example of money in the form of a man holding close to his pentacle symbol. He is seated on a large chair, similar to the throne of the emperor. Behind him is the skyline of a city, a cluster of people and dwellings, perhaps the product of this man's wealth. Some people, however, accuse this man of being a miser. Indeed, at his worst he is. At his best, though, he symbolizes the discipline of saving money for the building up of the mass of the abstract theoretical model used by the numerical tarot. He represents an aggressive, strengthening force that establishes a stable and bearing foundation for growth. Across from the 4 of Pentacles, the 6 of Pentacles shows us another product of wealth, that of charity, being symbolized here by a man dispensing alms to the poor. Together with the 4 of Pentacles, this card represents the give and take of the 4-6 exchange. Taking things in, 4, and giving them out, 6. The wealth of the man in the 6 of Pentacles describes how a good foundation and good business sense in the 4 leads to wealth in the 6. The 4 of Wands, on the other hand, shows us a more subtle expression of money. Although a bit vague in appearance, the numerical tarot sees the idea expressed in this card as that of a celebration or wedding or party. The spending of money, required for such a celebration, represents the systematic decrease of wealth. Put together, we see the 4 of Pentacles as a working man, saving, while the 4 of Wands represents a vacationing man, spending. However, as I attempt to show only the bad side of the negative, I would be inclined to view the 4 of Wands as a representation of a spending man wasting money. This idea of spending can be seen as a source of impotence and vulnerability, as the passive and weakening forces of this number yields to a compromised foundation and a lack of power. Across from the 4 of Wands is the 6 of Wands. Here we find that whereas the 4 of Wands symbolizes the spending of money in celebration, the 6 of Wands symbolizes the taking of something from another. In this card, an army of wand-bearing men are returning victoriously, having taken what they can from their enemy. In actuality, from the perspective of the numerical tarot, any one of these cards, the 4 or 6, of either pentacle or wand, could represent giving or taking. This in or out idea applies equally to both cards. In this particular deck we simply see an inverted symmetry, which reveals reciprocity within the deck design. Thus we see how the 4 of Pentacles takes and the 6 of Pentacles gives, while the 4 of Wands gives, or spends, and the 6 of Wands takes. As we move on we see how the 6 of Cups shows us the give and take of the intangible side of existence, in the form of childhood memories that we hold on to, or that return to us, symbolized by the image of children playing in front of a house. Is this ourselves as we would like to remember, or the lovers, as children? In the five senses model, we identified the sense of smell as a memory trigger. This is the card of that association, symbolized by the boy who is sniffing the flower in the cup. In this way, we come to view our memories as our personal possessions, equating this card with the idea of building up a mass of intangible existence. Also, the image of children playing in the yard conjures up the notion of family in the sustaining, nurturing environment this number represents. As the Six of Cups associates us with reliable, predictable memories of the past, the Six of Swords associates us with the dubious, unpredictable uncertainty of the future. Here we see a family of people in a boat, heading out across a body of water, toward a distant shore, leaving the turbulent waters, to their right, behind. Are they leaving voluntarily or are they in exile? We don't know. They are in a dubious and detrimental environment. The distant shore represents their unknown destiny. To complete our analysis of cards that represent the abstract, theoretical 4-6 mass of a model of existence, we move back to the Four of Cups. Yet another card that the Numerical Tarot would view as positive in a good way, but which, in the view of many, has been chosen to be expressed in a more somber, deceptively bad way. Here a man sits beneath a tree, appearing bored or disinterested in the fourth cup, being offered to him from the waiting cloud. But believe it or not, there is a way of seeing this card as good, if we consider it to be a symbol of fulfillment, the emotional equivalent to the physical wealth of the Four of Pentacles. In his denial, this man is not so much disinterested as he is passive. In other words, he can take or leave whatever is being offered, he is secure with what he has and does not want to stir his greed. Thus, to the Numerical Tarot, he becomes a representation of a virtuous and fortunate man. This card symbolizes an established foundation, and stable and bearing power, symbolized by the firmly rooted tree that supports his weight. If we choose to view the Suit of Cups as representing aspects of a Holy Grail quest, as some do, then we could interpret the cloud with cup as representing something similar to the dream of Sir Lancelot, dreaming of the power contained therein. In this way, a dream of a grail becomes a dream of empowerment. The idea of empowerment then equals an emotional wealth, that stands as a partner to the material wealth of the Four of Pentacles. In moving on, we see how the strength and security of the Four of Cups is opposed by the vulnerability of the Four of Swords. Here, the image of a sarcophagus, topped with an effigy, relates this card to its parent card of death in the majors, thus symbolizing a feeble, impotent mass of yielding power, i.e. laying down to die instead of standing tall. On the matrix. In this formation, the Four of Pentacles represents the physical action of work as well as laying a foundation for a family, our common core, while the Six of Pentacles represents the thought process of what to do with earnings. The Four of Cups then represents the state of being secure in a job or family environment, while the Six of Cups represents the emotions that tie families together and maintain loyalty among friends and family. On the negative, deteriorate side, the Four of Wands represents the action of dismantling a core in the form of spending all its wealth, while the Six of Wands represents the thought process that causes people to hold on to things they should let go of. Then, the Four of Swords represents the state of being poor, poor of wealth, poor of health, or poor of courage. While the Six of Swords reveals the emotions of exile from friends, family, or the core of our theoretical model of existence. Back to majors. In relating these cards to the majors, the coffin in the Four of Swords and the Death card becomes an obvious association. While the working man of the Four of Pentacles equates with the strength and wealth of the Emperor. Then we can see how the generosity in the Six of Pentacles and the feelings of family in the Six of Cups relate to the loyalty and sense of family found in the Lover's card. Likewise, the dubious future in the Six of Swords and the idea of stealing, or being stolen from, in the Six of Wands, equates with the bad influence found in the Devil card. In the seasonal tarot deck, we see in the Four of Coins, a strong man carrying a burden on his shoulder, opposed by a man looking vulnerable and in fear. Then in the Four of Cups, a man standing like a pillar, opposed by a man looking weak in the knees. In the Six of Coins, a man is giving a gift, opposed by a man taking back that gift. In the Six of Cups, a woman invites a man in, opposed by a couple being shunned and forced to leave. In the isomorphic tarot deck, the building of a mass of existence is symbolized by a construction site, while on the negative side, weakness is symbolized by a collapsing house. In the suit of roses, a stable foundation is symbolized by a brick building. While on the negative side, a weak foundation is symbolized by someone falling through thin ice. Progress, and the continued advancement of a theoretical mass of existence, is seen in the six of coins with a wealth of corn growing in a field. On the negative side, poverty and the decay of the theoretical mass of existence is seen in a crumbling wall and unraveling linen. In the suit of roses, a sustaining environment is seen in the drinking glasses of friends around a table. While on the negative side, animosity and exile are seen in the exclusion of one sword from the rest. In the numerical tarot deck, many ideas are carried over from the isomorphic deck. The idea of construction is seen in a couple with building materials and tools and a strong house behind, while the strength required to be constructive is seen in a couple of bodybuilders with muscles, posing. They are opposed by a couple with tools of destruction in a collapsing house behind, while a couple of crippled people are listening to the ice beneath their feet, cracking. Across the way, we see a prosperous family having a bountiful picnic, and someone getting a present, while a couple and child are waving to invite us into a party. They are opposed a poor and homeless family cooking a can of beans over a crude fire, while an unwanted couple who are unwelcome are abandoning their child. In the Fives of Pentacles and Cups, we see two more examples of cards the numerical tarot would view as positive and good, but that appear negative or even bad in the Rider Waite Smith deck. At the same time, the negative side of wands and swords also show fives that look bad. This, I, and others, theorize to be the result of people using the Kabbalah to determine meanings for the cards of the minor arcana. In the Kabbalah, the fifth Sephiroth is all about the stripping away of our mundane self on a path of enlightenment. In this way it is very similar to the destruction of built-up beliefs that are being struck down in the Tower card. Thus its influence through the deck causes images and ideas of loss or trouble, as people react to this influence upon them. In a balanced deck, like the numerical tarot, the lack of symmetry and lack of balance that we see by depicting all of the fives this way is corrected. The number 5 is a pivotal point on the number line, and as such becomes an important number to the idea of control. On the negative side this control is in trouble or not in control. On the positive side it is, or should be, affirmative, or in control. In the Five of Wands, we have what the numerical tarot would consider a correct example of negative control, 5 young men mixing it up at the midpoint of the number line. In creating such a conflict they symbolize the physical aspects of competing over the final, central, or pivotal point of the theoretical model existence. At best we see them as just that, competing. They are rivals, meeting a challenge. At worst however, they are seen as antagonistic, arguing and fighting, in a state of total anarchy. Next, in the Five of Swords, we see a man who has successfully defeated 2 other opponents and taken their swords from them. In causing such defeat, he symbolizes the less tangible, more emotional equivalent to the competition seen in the Five of Wands, that of winning or losing. At best he represents winning domination. At worst he represents a shallow victory or in the case of the other 2 men, a crushing defeat. Thus we see how this man has taken the vulnerability of the Four of Swords, defeated it in the 5 and sent it into exile in the following 6, 4, 5, 6. On the ameliorate side, we should have 2 examples of affirmative control. Again, if this deck were laid out properly, the 5 of Pentacles would have the same young men as the 5 of Wands, only now they would be shaking hands, working together as a team, i.e., cooperative mates instead of antagonistic rivals. At best they would represent agreements, cooperation, and conformity, an alternating 5 that governs effectively. At worst they would represent manipulation, and excessive governmental control. But instead this deck has chosen to illustrate this card with 2 people, down and out, perhaps the victims of manipulation, or perhaps the victims of the alleged miser in card 4, and looking for alms in card 6, 4, 5, 6. They are peasants who are lost. They are not in control, but urgently seek it. They need salvation to get back on their feet and regain the control they had. Perhaps they will find what they need in the church they are passing. Or maybe they will find it in the following 6 of Pentacles card. Moving on, we see, in the 5 of Cups, how the issue is not one of winning or losing, but security versus insecurity. Here, though, we see what looks like the bad side of this card being illustrated. The man in this card is upset over the spilt cups in front of him. To the numerical tarot he symbolizes the rigidity of a person who is in fact too secure. This man is living in a rut. He has been so accustomed to having 5 secure cups in front of him, that the loss of 3 might just as well mean the loss of all. He becomes so preoccupied with his loss, that he doesn't even acknowledge the other 2 cups still intact. At best we could say that he is safe and secure, proud and righteous. At worst he is upset and doesn't know what to do. He is emotionally lost and guilt-ridden. He symbolizes something that has gone wrong instead of right. On the matrix. On the matrix of interrelated ideas used by the Numerical Tarot, we see how the ultimate in-betweenness of a 5 doesn't really fit into the same scheme of cards with equidistant partners as seen in every other card. But, because all cards are capable of representing all aspects of extremes and in-betweens, the 5s do contain divisions between action and emotion. But because there are no opposing cards to delineate these separations, they are simply understood as coexistent within each card. Back to majors. In relating these cards to the majors, we associate the arguments of the 5 of Wands, and the losing in the 5 of Swords to the need for temperance within a core, and thereby relate these cards to what we consider to be the misplaced card of temperance. And in restoring the 5 of Pentacles to that of cooperative mates and the 5 of Cups to a secure and safe life, we associate these cards to the control of the Hierophant card. In the seasonal tarot deck, we see, in the 5 of Coins, a woman and man shaking hands in agreement, opposed by a couple wrestling in disagreement. In the 5 of Cups is a settled union, opposed by shame and guilt. In the isomorphic tarot deck, a controlled exchange is symbolized by 2 people shaking hands. While on the negative side we see 2 people arguing and wrestling for wands. In the suit of Roses, temperance is seen in the equipoise of an eagle. While on the negative side, a flying demon creates nothing but trouble. In the Numerical Tarot deck, many ideas are carried over from the isomorphic deck. On the positive side, we see cooperation and agreement with a couple sharing and shaking hands, while another couple uses that agreement as bonds for marriage. On the negative side, we see a couple arguing and fighting, while another couple uses that disagreement to break their bonds of marriage. In conclusion, let's review, or take a guess, at which cards in the Numerical Tarot are similar enough to the Rider Waite Smith deck as to be acceptable, versus cards that are so different as to most probably be rejected by devotees of the Rider Waite Smith deck, or mainstream tarot in general, as wrong. In the minors, people will not like any of the aces, and probably have problems with my associations of suits to seasons and math. In the suit of Coins, they will not like changing the 5 to be more positive. In the suit of Cups, they will not like changing the 4 or 5, or 8 to be more positive. In the suit of Staves, they will not like changing the 2, 3 or 4 to be more negative. They will not like what is done to the 6. In the suit of Swords, they might not like the 4. They will probably not like the 7. In the court, they might only not like what is done to the Staves and Swords. But, I ask you, look at how many cards are either the same as the Rider Waite Smith deck, or something close to it. How is that possible? This underlying structure has nothing to do with the occult influences that have dictated most of the images of tradition. What if the more logical game-like structure is original and everywhere there is an X mark someone has strayed from that design? What if the Numerical Tarot is in fact a restoration of an original design? What if those wrong cards were corrected? Try it. Make a deck that values balance, symmetry, contrast and consistency, with harmony of interpretation throughout. An axial system of archetypal crystallography. If you are an artist, or know any, it might be a cool thing to do. That's the end of this analysis. We can do the court cards another time. Before we end this though, thanks for watching all of these last 2 videos. They are of course super long videos because there are a lot of cards in a tarot deck, even a deck like mine that doesn't have any 10s. So even if I only talk about a card for a couple of minutes, when multiplied by all the cards that need to be covered, across 2 decks being compared to each other, it adds up to a long time. Thanks for your patience. Hope it was worth it. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching. Hope it made sense. Links to eBooks, decks and merchandise below. And if anyone is interested in drawing a deck based on this system of organization, don't hesitate to contact me for a collaboration.